It is Sunday, November 2nd, 2025. You're watching Fox 5's On the Hill. I'm Tom Fitzgerald. Hope you turned your clocks back.
We all have more power than we think. We just have to use it. So if you believe in that better story of America, do not sit this one out.
That, of course, is former President Barack Obama stumping for Democratic gubernatorial candidate Abigail Spanberger in Virginia this week. And he also rallied with crowds up in New Jersey for the Democratic gubernatorial candidate there. Now, in Virginia, the latest polls out of Roanoke College find that the Democratic candidate Abigail Spanberger has a 10-point lead over the Lieutenant Governor Republican Winsome Earl Sears. Now, these numbers are closer in the Lieutenant Governor's race, where Democrats are leading in that race now by just 2 points. And for Attorney General, Republican Jason Miyares is now said to be leading Democrat Jay Jones by 46 to 38% in that poll. We want to welcome in Kyle Kondik. He is the managing editor of Samato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia's Center for Politics. Kyle, good to see you as always. Let's start with the governor's race now. Abigail Spanberger has led pretty much wire to wire right now. You know, we've heard reports here and there that Sears was cutting into that lead, but nothing of consequence. This seems to be pretty much a straight run for Spanberger at this point.
Yeah, look, I don't think there's much question that Spanberger is going to win. It's just a question of margin. You know, the number that I'm looking at is 9 points. That's the margin that Ralph Northam won the 2017 governor's race by. I'm kind of curious if Spanberger ends up, you know, a little bit below that, a little bit above that. I mean, you know, it's possible that it could be dramatically different than that. But I think that's a pretty good measuring stick, because you remember 2017 was the first year of Donald Trump's first term. There was a clear backlash against him. I'm curious to see how does this measure up to what we saw 8 years ago?
Kyle, before this race took shape and form, there were big questions in Virginia about whether or not the current Republican Attorney General, Jason Miyares, would mount a run for governor against Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears. Are Republicans having any buyer's remorse right now as they look at Miyares' lead in the polls right now heading into Tuesday?
Yeah, I think it's possible, although you got to remember the AG race has developed in a completely different way than the governor's race, to the point where some of the things that Winsome Earl Sears is trying to use against Abigail Spanberger are, attacks from the Miyares campaign against Jay Jones. Of course, Jay Jones had that texting scandal. He said a lot of horrible things, and that has sort of changed that race, although I still think that race really could go either way. But I think if Miyares were running against Spanberger, he might be struggling to find, effective hits to use against Spanberger, too, the same way that Earl Sears has.
You know, there are October surprises, Kyle, and then there are October surprises. Jay Jones's text openly talking about, murdering the former Republican Speaker of the House of Delegates and then wishing death upon the former Speaker's children was just mind-boggling to a lot of people. How he stayed in this race. Now, was this a case of Democrats rallying around Jay Jones, or did they simply not have an alternative this late in the game?
There really was no alternative. If this had come out earlier, it might have been possible to replace Jones on the ballot. But by the time the story came out, there really was no recourse. So it was basically either Jay Jones stays in or Democrats concede the race. And different Democrats have handled it in different ways, although there certainly weren't any widespread calls for him to leave the race, even though there was condemnation of his remarks. But yeah, I mean, we're at a time where I think there are certain things that have emerged as scandals that, 10, 20, 30 years ago would have ended a race or ended a candidacy. I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore. Again, I think that, Miyares has pretty consistently led in the polls recently, although not in all of them. The leads have varied. And the danger for Miyares is that if Spanberger wins, by that 9-point Northam margin or even more than that, is there just enough capacity for ticket splitting for Mayoras to be able to win? And we're at a time where there's not as much ticket splitting typically in these races as there used to be, although here you have a clear reason for voters to split their tickets because the Jones story is so outrageous.
Yeah, and clearly Democrats want a clean sweep both in Virginia and New Jersey to send a national message as these elections being some kind of response to what's going on in Washington. Kyle Kondik from the University of Virginia Center for Politics. Kyle, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for your time on a busy weekend.
Thanks for having me.
All right, reminder, Fox 5 is your place for election coverage on Tuesday and Election Day. We're going to have all the details throughout the day with special coverage that starts at 7 p.m.